The flames licked the sky that night, orange tongues dancing against the darkness of a quiet Texas suburb. Neighbors would later say they heard nothing unusual, no screams, no shattering glass, just the roar of fire consuming wood and memories. By the time the fire trucks arrived, the house at 847 Maple Drive was already half collapsed, smoke billowing into the night like a dark prayer ascending to an indifferent heaven. They said the fire was an accident, but fires don't turn off smoke alarms. Inside the ruins, firefighters found what they believed was a body, burned beyond recognition, curled in the fetal position near what had once been a bedroom door. The medical examiner would later confirm. Female, late 20s, approximately 7 months pregnant. Both mother and unborn child were pronounced dead at the scene. The community of Ridgway, Texas mourned. Vigils were held. Flowers piled up on the charred lawn. And Calvin Brooks, the grieving widower, stood before news cameras with tears streaming down his handsome face, his voice breaking as he spoke of the love of his life, taken too soon. But before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoy educational stories like this, be sure to like the video, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share it with someone who'd love it too. This is the story of Lena Brooks. Or rather, this is the story of what happened when everyone thought Lena Brooks was dead. 6 months before the fire, Lena had been happy. Not the complicated, qualified happiness of adulthood, but the genuine, uncomplicated joy of a woman who believed her life was finally falling into place. She stood in her kitchen on a Sunday morning, flour dusting her hands as she kneaded dough for the dinner rolls she'd bring to the church potluck. At 29, she'd built a catering business from scratch, earned the respect of her community, and married a man who seemed to love her completely. Calvin Brooks had swept into her life 3 years earlier like a romance novel come to life. Tall, charismatic, with the kind of smile that made people trust him instantly. He worked in real estate investment, or so he told everyone. The truth was more complicated. He flipped properties, made deals, borrowed from one investor to pay another. But Lena didn't know that. She only knew that he made her laugh, that he talked about their future with certainty, that he'd gotten down on one knee in front of her entire family and promised to build a life with her. "Baby, I'm heading out," Calvin called from the hallway that morning, adjusting his tie in the mirror. "Meeting with some potential investors." Lena wiped her hands on her apron and walked to him, pressing a kiss to his cheek. Her belly, round and full at 7 months, bumped against him. "What time will you be home?" "Late. Don't wait up." He barely looked at her as he said it, his eyes already distant, focused on something she couldn't see. She should have noticed then. Should have registered the way he'd been pulling away, the late nights that grew more frequent, the phone calls he took in another room. But love makes you blind, doesn't it? Or maybe it makes you choose blindness because seeing would hurt too much. The cracks had started small. A missed dinner here, a forgotten anniversary there. Calvin had always been ambitious. It was one of the things Lena admired about him. But lately, his ambition had curdled into something else. Desperation, maybe. Or greed. "Calvin, we need to talk about the insurance policy," Lena had said one evening, 2 months before the fire. She'd found the paperwork while looking for tax documents. A life insurance policy in her name. $2 million. "Why is it so high? We don't need that much coverage." He'd smiled, that easy, charming smile that at first won her heart. "Just being responsible, baby. With the baby coming, I want to make sure you're both taken care of if anything happens to me. But it's in my name. Split policy. I've got one too. Standard stuff." He'd kissed her forehead, ending the conversation before it could begin. "Don't worry about it." She let it go. Added it to the growing list of things she let go because questioning them felt like doubting their marriage, and doubting their marriage felt like failing. But Calvin Brooks was a man with secrets that burrowed deep. And the biggest secret had a name, Serena Vale. Serena was everything Lena wasn't. Where Lena was soft and nurturing, Serena was sharp and hungry. She'd met Calvin at a real estate networking event, recognized in him the same ruthless ambition that drove her own climb through the city's nightlife and marketing scene. They'd started as business associates, then collaborators, then something more dangerous. "When are you going to leave her?" Serena asked one night, lying in Calvin's downtown apartment, the one Lena didn't know about. "You keep saying you will, but she's about to pop out a kid. You think it gets easier after that?" Calvin stared at the ceiling, running calculations in his head. Divorce meant splitting assets, meant child support, meant his carefully constructed image as a family man crumbling. And he needed that image. His political aspirations, city council first, then maybe state legislature, required the veneer of stability. "I'm working on something," he said finally. "A way to solve all our problems." Serena propped herself up on one elbow, studying his face. "What kind of something?" "Better you don't know yet. But trust me, by this time next year, I'll be free, you'll be by my side, and we'll have the money to fund whatever future we want." The idea had come to him gradually, seeded by desperation and watered by Serena's influence. A house fire. A tragic accident. Gas leaks happened all the time in older homes. And Lena, poor Lena, was so tired lately, so distracted with the pregnancy. Who could blame her for not noticing a smell, for falling asleep with a faulty detector? But Calvin Brooks wasn't a killer by nature. He was a coward who needed someone else to do his dirty work. That's where Marcus Vale came in. Marcus was Serena's cousin, though she rarely acknowledged the connection. He'd been a fire inspector once, before he got caught accepting bribes to overlook code violations. The scandal had destroyed his career, left him bitter and broke, willing to do things he'd once considered unthinkable. "You want me to what?" Marcus asked when Calvin first approached him, his voice low in the corner booth of a dive bar an hour outside Ridgeway. "I need it to look natural. A gas leak. Faulty smoke detectors. These things happen." Calvin slid an envelope across the table. 20,000 now. 80 more when it's done. Marcus stared at the envelope for a long moment. He thought about his ex-wife, his kid he couldn't afford to see, the creditors circling like vultures. He thought about the line he was about to cross. "When?" he asked, pocketing the envelope. 2 weeks. I'll make sure I'm out of town." Airtight alibi. The plan came together with the terrible efficiency of the desperate. Marcus would enter the house while Lena was out, disable the smoke detectors, tamper with the gas line in the basement. The ignition would come from the water heater, a spark, perfectly plausible. The fire would start small, giving him time to leave undetected, then spread fast. "What about the wife?" Marcus asked during one of their planning sessions. Calvin's jaw tightened. "What about her?" "She's pregnant." "You thought about that?" "Don't." Calvin's voice went hard. "Don't make me think about it. This is business. This is survival. She's collateral." But even saying it made him feel sick. There were moments, late at night, when he'd watch Lena sleeping beside him, her hand resting on her belly where their child grew, and he'd think, "I can't do this. I won't." Then he'd remember the debts, the investors he'd swindled, the house of cards that was his entire financial life, ready to collapse and take him down with it. The insurance money was the only way out. And Serena. Serena made him feel alive in a way Lena never had. So he pushed the guilt down deep and kept planning. Lena felt the shift in her husband, but misunderstood its source. She thought maybe he was scared about becoming a father. She'd read about that. How men sometimes pulled away when the reality of parenthood hit. She tried to give him space, tried to be understanding, even as her intuition screamed that something was deeply wrong. "Mama, do you think Calvin's happy about the baby?" she asked her mother over the phone one afternoon, 3 weeks before the fire. Her mother paused, and Lena could hear the careful consideration in the silence. "Why do you ask, baby? He just seems distant. Like his mind is somewhere else. Men get scared sometimes. It's a big change. Give him time. He'll come around." But time was the one thing Lena didn't have. The night of the fire started like any other. Lena had spent the day catering a retirement party, coming home exhausted at 9:30, her feet swollen, her back aching. Calvin had texted earlier, out with clients. "Don't wait up." She'd eaten a sandwich standing at the kitchen counter, too tired to sit. She'd checked on the nursery one more time. Freshly painted in soft yellow, crib assembled, tiny clothes folded in drawers. 3 months until her due date. 3 months until everything changed. She fell asleep by 10, the baby kicking against her ribs as she drifted off. She didn't hear Marcus Vale break the lock on the basement window at 10:45. Marcus moved through the basement like a ghost, his penlight cutting thin lines through the darkness. He'd been a fire inspector for 12 years before disgrace found him, which meant he knew exactly how to make a house burn and exactly how to make it look like nobody's fault. The gas line ran along the basement ceiling, copper piping that fed the water heater and the stove upstairs. Marcus pulled a wrench from his bag and carefully loosened the connection at the water heater. Not enough to cause an immediate leak, just enough that gas would seep out slowly, filling the basement first, then rising through the vents into the main floor. By morning, the house would be saturated. Any spark would turn it into an inferno. The smoke detectors came next. He'd already researched the model, wireless, battery-operated, networked throughout the house. He pulled each one down, removed the batteries, and replaced them with dead ones from his pocket. To a casual observer, they'd look fine. But when the fire started, they'd stay silent. He was back out the basement window by 11:15. The whole operation took 30 minutes. As he drove away, Marcus tried not to think about the pregnant woman sleeping upstairs. Tried not to imagine what would happen when the gas found a spark. Tried to convince himself that $20,000 in his pocket plus the promise of 80 more was worth the weight he'd carry for the rest of his life. It wasn't. But by then, it was too late to stop. Calvin was in Dallas that night, exactly where he needed to be. He'd checked into a hotel at 6, made sure to be seen at the bar by 8, had dinner with 2 business associates who'd swear he never left their sight. He'd built his alibi carefully, each piece fitting together like a puzzle. But Serena was in Ridgeway, parked 3 blocks from Maple Drive, waiting. "It's done," Marcus said when he called at 11:20. "Get out of there." "How long?" Serena's voice was tight, adrenaline making her hands shake on the steering wheel. "Gas needs time to build up. Ignition could happen any time after midnight. Could be 1, could be 3. Depends on when something sparks." "And you're sure it'll work?" "Gas leak plus a water heater pilot light? Yeah, it'll work. Now get the hell out of there before someone sees you." But Serena didn't leave. She couldn't. Some sick part of her needed to see it, needed to witness the moment that would set her and Calvin free. She parked at the end of the street, engine off, and waited. Inside the house, Lena dreamed. She dreamed of her daughter. Somehow she knew it would be a daughter, running through a field of wildflowers, laughing. She dreamed of teaching her to bake, of first days of school, of all the moments that make a life. In the dream, she was happy, whole, loved. The gas was filling the house while she dreamed. At 2:17 in the morning, the water heater's pilot light found the gas. The explosion shattered every window on the ground floor. Flames erupted through the kitchen, racing up the walls, consuming curtains and furniture with terrifying speed. The house became an oven in seconds. Lena woke to heat and smoke, her lungs screaming for air that had turned to poison. She rolled out of bed, disoriented, her pregnant belly throwing off her center of gravity. The bedroom door was already hot to the touch. When she opened it, a wall of black smoke hit her, acrid and choking. "Calvin!" she screamed, forgetting he wasn't home, her mind still foggy with sleep and terror. "Calvin, help me!" She dropped to her hands and knees, crawling toward the stairs. The baby was thrashing inside her, panicking as her oxygen levels dropped. Every breath was agony. The smoke was so thick she couldn't see her own hands on the carpet. She made it to the top of the stairs before she heard voices outside. Through the roar of the flames, she heard laughing. Laughing. Lena crawled to the window, her strength fading. Through the smoke-streaked glass, she could see 2 figures standing across the street. A man and a woman. The woman's face was illuminated by her phone screen as she filmed the burning house. And the man beside her. Even through the smoke, even with her vision blurring, Lena knew that posture, that height, that shape. "Calvin," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the fire's roar. He was supposed to be in Dallas. He was supposed to be safe, unaware, arriving home to tragedy. But he was here, standing in the street, watching her burn. The realization hit her harder than the smoke, harder than the heat. He'd done this. Her husband, the man she'd pledged her life to, the father of her child, had tried to kill her. "No," she breathed. And then louder, "No." She tried to stand, tried to get to the door, tried to escape, but her legs wouldn't hold her. The smoke had won. She collapsed against the window, her hand pressed to the glass, watching Calvin wrap his arm around the woman beside him. The last thing she saw before unconsciousness took her was Calvin kissing that woman, celebrating, while everything Lena had ever loved burned to ash. She didn't see the beam fall from the ceiling and crash through the bedroom floor. She didn't feel herself tumbling into the inferno below. She didn't know that the body firefighters would later find, burned beyond recognition, wasn't hers. Serena had panicked when she saw the size of the explosion. Jesus Christ, Calvin, there's no way this looks like an accident. Calvin had watched the house burn with an expression Serena couldn't read. Horror maybe, or satisfaction, or both. Doesn't matter. Gas leak, old house, faulty detectors, it happens. They won't question it. We need to go? Now. Before someone sees us. Wait. Calvin pulled out his phone, hands shaking, and dialed 911. When the operator answered, his voice was perfect, panicked, desperate, the concerned husband calling from Dallas after a neighbor's frantic call. My house is on fire. My wife is inside. Please, you have to help her. She's pregnant. The performance was flawless. Even Serena almost believed him. They left before the fire trucks arrived, speeding away into the night. Calvin dropped Serena at her apartment and drove straight back to Dallas, checking into his hotel room as if he'd never left. His associates would swear they'd seen him there all night. The hotel's cameras would show him in the lobby at 7 a.m., learning the terrible news. At 3:42 in the morning, Captain James Reeves of the Ridgeway Fire Department radioed that they'd found a body. Female. Pregnant. Deceased. By 4 a.m., Calvin was on the phone with the Ridgeway police, his voice breaking as he demanded to know what happened to his wife. An hour later, he was speeding back from Dallas, the devastated husband racing home to tragedy. The medical examiner would later determine that the body found in the ruins had died of smoke inhalation before the fire reached her. A small mercy, they said. She and the baby hadn't suffered long. The funeral was held 5 days later. Calvin stood at the graveside in a black suit, accepting condolences with hollow eyes. Lena's mother collapsed against her husband, sobbing. Friends from church formed a circle of grief, wondering how God could allow such things. The insurance company processed Calvin's claim with remarkable efficiency. $2 million. Paid in full. No investigation, no questions. Just a check and a sympathy card. Calvin Brooks was free, wealthy, tragic and sympathetic in the public eye. Everything had gone according to plan. Except Lena wasn't dead. Ruth Calder had been a fire marshal for 33 years before retiring to a cabin in the woods 50 miles outside Ridgeway. She'd seen every kind of fire, every type of burn pattern, every way flame could destroy. And something about the Maple Drive fire bothered her. She'd heard about it on the scanner she kept by her bedside. Old habits die hard. House fire, pregnant woman dead, husband out of town. Tragic, but not uncommon. Still, something made her get in her truck at 4 in the morning and drive to Ridgeway. By the time she arrived, the fire was out. The house was a skeleton of charred beams and collapsed walls. Police tape cordoned off the property. Ruth parked down the street and watched the investigators work, her trained eye cataloging details. Burn patterns suggested origin in the basement, consistent with gas leak. But the spread had been too fast, too uniform. And the smoke detectors, she could see them scattered in the debris, looked wrong. Too intact for the heat they should have experienced. Ruth was about to leave when she heard it. A sound from the rubble. Soft. Almost imperceptible. A moan. She was moving before her brain caught up, crossing the police tape, ignoring the shout from a young officer. She navigated the wreckage with the surety of someone who'd spent a lifetime reading fire scenes. The sound was coming from what had been the living room, now a pit of ash and broken furniture. There, half buried in debris, was a woman. Not the body they'd already removed, another woman. Younger, dark hair matted with blood and soot. And despite the burns covering her arms and legs, despite the way her breathing rattled in her chest, she was alive. But there was more. Ruth knelt beside her, pressing fingers to her neck to check the pulse. The woman's belly, though partially hidden by a fallen beam, was unmistakably swollen. Not 7 months pregnant like the news report said, more like 8 or 9. And as Ruth watched, the woman's eyes fluttered open for just a moment. Dark eyes, full of agony and something else, recognition. She'd seen something, known something, before the fire took her consciousness. Help? The woman whispered, blood bubbling at the corner of her mouth. My baby. Ruth made a decision in that moment that would change everything. Instead of calling for the paramedics swarming the scene 20 yards away, she checked the woman's vitals quickly. Pulse weak, but steady. Breathing shallow. Burns severe, but survivable. The pregnancy complicated everything. The woman needed a hospital, needed doctors, needed help Ruth couldn't provide alone. But Ruth had seen enough corruption in her 3 decades of service to recognize a setup when she saw one. The disabled smoke detectors. The too perfect burn pattern. The husband conveniently out of town. And now, a second woman in the ruins who shouldn't exist. Someone had tried very hard to kill this woman. And if Ruth called for help, whoever that someone was would try again. Ruth worked fast. She dragged a tarp from her truck and gently rolled the unconscious woman onto it, wincing at every pained moan. The police and investigators were focused on the front of the property, processing the scene where they'd found the first body. Ruth used the back route, pulling the tarp through the neighboring yard, thanking God for the pre-dawn darkness. Getting the woman into her truck was harder. Ruth was 62, her back wasn't what it used to be, and she was moving dead weight. But adrenaline has a way of making the impossible merely difficult. She positioned her truck behind a row of bushes, lifted the tailgate, and somehow, God help her, got the woman into the truck bed, covering her with more tarps and camping equipment. She drove away slowly, calmly, just another early morning commuter. No one stopped her. No one questioned the retired fire marshal leaving a scene she had no business being at. The cabin was an hour away, deep enough in the woods that neighbors were measured in miles rather than yards. Ruth had built it herself after her divorce, after her son died in Iraq, after she realized she didn't want to be around people anymore. It had running water from a well, electricity from solar panels, and enough supplies to last through a hard winter. She pulled the woman inside and laid her on the guest bed. In the growing morning light, Ruth could finally assess the damage properly. Second-degree burns covered both arms and the left leg. Smoke inhalation, bad, but not fatal if treated quickly. Possible concussion from the head wound. And the pregnancy. Ruth placed her hand on the woman's belly and felt movement. Strong kicks. The baby was alive. Okay, kid, Ruth muttered. Let's keep you both that way. She'd been a volunteer EMT before becoming a fire marshal, enough to handle basic trauma. She cleaned the burns with sterile saline, applied antibiotic ointment, wrapped them in gauze. She inserted in 4-line and started fluids. She monitored vitals every 15 minutes. And she waited. The woman, Lena, though Ruth didn't know her name yet, stayed unconscious for 2 days. Fever spiked and broke. Breathing stabilized. The burns began the slow process of healing. On the 3rd day, her eyes opened. Where? The word came out as a croak, Lena's throat still raw from smoke. Ruth appeared beside the bed, offering water through a straw. Easy. Small sips. You've been through hell. Lena drank, the cool water like salvation, and tried to sit up. Pain exploded through her body, and she gasped, falling back against the pillows. Don't move yet. You've got burns on about 15% of your body. They're healing, but you need to stay still. Ruth pulled a chair close to the bed. Can you tell me your name? Lena. Another sip of water. Lena Brooks. There was a fire. My house. Memory crashed over her, and she grabbed Ruth's wrist with surprising strength. My husband. He was there. He watched me burn. A sob broke through. He tried to kill me. Calvin tried to kill me. I know. Ruth's voice was gentle. I pulled you out of that fire 3 days ago. You shouldn't be alive, but you are. And I need you to understand something, Lena. The world thinks you're dead. The words took time to penetrate. Lena stared at the ceiling, processing. Dead. They found another body in the fire. Identified as you. Your husband has already buried you. Had a funeral. Collected the insurance money. Another body? Horror washed over Lena's face. Who? I don't know. But someone else died in that fire, and your husband is letting everyone believe it was you. Ruth leaned forward. Which means he thinks he got away with it. And it means you have a choice to make. I need to go to the police. I need to tell them. Tell them what? That your husband tried to kill you? With what proof? He has an alibi, I guarantee it. He was somewhere else when the fire started. And right now, you're legally dead. If you show up alive, the first thing he'll do is destroy whatever evidence exists. He'll have lawyers, money, influence. And you? You're a ghost. Lena's hand moved to her belly. The baby kicked against her palm, and she started to cry. My baby. I need to get to a hospital. I need. You're 36 weeks pregnant, Ruth said quietly. That baby could come any day. And when it does, what then? You show up at a hospital, legally dead, claiming your husband tried to murder you? They'll take that baby away before you finish the story. Put her in the system while they sort out the mess. Maybe your husband gets investigated, maybe he doesn't. But either way, you lose your child. The truth of it settled over Lena like a shroud. She was trapped, dead but alive, free but imprisoned. And her baby, her precious baby, was caught in the middle. "What do I do?" she whispered. "For now, you survive, you heal, and you let me help you figure out the rest." 6 days later, Lena went into labor. It started at 3 in the morning, a tightening in her belly that gradually turned to pain. She'd read the books, taken the classes with Calvin back when she still thought they'd be parents together. She knew what was happening. "Ruth," her voice cut through the cabin's darkness. "Ruth, it's time." The delivery was everything childbirth is supposed to be: terrifying, miraculous, primal, and transcendent. Ruth had delivered babies before, during her EMT days, but never like this. Never in a cabin with minimal supplies, no hospital backup, no doctors standing by for complications. "Push," Ruth commanded, and Lena pushed, screaming her rage and fear and love into the night. At 6:42 in the morning, as the first light touched the trees outside, Lena's daughter came into the world. Tiny, perfect, with a full head of dark hair and lungs that announced her arrival with impressive volume. "It's a girl," Ruth said, placing the baby on Lena's chest. "You've got a daughter." Lena held her child, felt the weight of her, smelled the impossible sweetness of her skin. She'd imagined this moment 1,000 times, but never like this. Not in hiding. Not while the world thought both of them were dead. Not while her husband celebrated their murder. "I'll call her Elena," Lena whispered, tracing her daughter's face with one finger. "After my grandmother. She deserves a name that means something." But the moment was brief. The baby, born 3 weeks premature in less than sterile conditions, needed more than Lena could give. Her breathing was labored. Her color wasn't quite right. She needed a hospital, needed doctors, needed the NICU. Ruth made the hardest call of her life. Dr. Sarah Chun arrived 2 hours later. She was an old friend from Ruth's firefighting days, someone who'd treated too many burn victims to count, someone who knew how to keep her mouth shut. She examined the baby with quick, efficient hands. "She needs oxygen therapy and monitoring. I can stabilize her here, but she really needs a hospital." "Can't happen," Ruth said. "You know why." Sarah looked at Lena, at the burns still healing on her arms, at the desperation in her eyes. "Who's after you?" "My husband. And he's rich, connected, and thinks you're both dead," Ruth added. "We take this baby to a hospital under Lena's name, and he finds out within hours." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I know someone. A couple. They've been trying to adopt for years. Can't have children of their own. They're good people, wealthy enough to afford excellent medical care, and they'd love this child like their own." "No." Lena's voice was sharp. "She's mine. She's all I have left." "She's also dying," Sarah said gently. "Without proper care, she won't survive the week. And you can barely walk. You're legally dead. You have no identity, no money, no way to care for her. This isn't about what you want, Lena. It's about what she needs." The truth of it broke Lena's heart. She looked down at her daughter, Elena, her Elena, sleeping fitfully against her chest. Every breath was a struggle. Every moment without proper care brought her closer to the edge. "If I give her up," Lena said, "do I ever get her back?" "I don't know," Ruth said honestly. "But if you keep her now, she dies. At least this way, she lives. And maybe, someday, when you're not dead anymore, when you've brought down the man who tried to kill you both, maybe then you find her." It was the cruelest choice a mother could make. Let go now, or lose forever. Lena held her daughter for 3 more hours, memorized every detail of her face, sang her the lullabies her own mother had sung to her, whispered promises she didn't know if she could keep. "I will come back for you," she told Elena. "I promise. Your daddy tried to bury us both, but we're survivors, you and me. I'll get stronger. I'll get justice. And I'll find you again." Sarah took the baby at sunset. The couple, Mark and Jennifer Hammond, were waiting at a private facility 2 hours away. They'd signed the papers that night. The baby would become theirs legally, and Lena would have nothing but the memory of those few precious hours. She watched Sarah's car disappear down the dirt road, taking half her heart with it. Then she collapsed. The coma lasted 4 months. The physical trauma combined with the emotional devastation had broken something fundamental in Lena. Her body shut down, retreated into unconsciousness, tried to heal what couldn't be healed. Ruth kept vigil, monitoring her vitals, adjusting for fluids, talking to her even though Lena couldn't hear. "Your daughter is safe," she'd say. "The Hammonds named her Eliza. They love her. She's thriving. You did the right thing." In town, Calvin Brooks was building a new life on the ashes of his old one. He'd bought a new house, bigger, better, in a more prestigious neighborhood. He'd started laying groundwork for his city council run. And he'd proposed to Serena Vale in a very public, very romantic gesture that made the local news. "To new beginnings," he'd said, slipping a diamond ring on her finger. Marcus Vale took his $80,000 and disappeared. He bought a house in Montana, tried to drink away the memory of what he'd done. Some nights, he'd wake up screaming, seeing a pregnant woman's face in the flames. But mostly he just drank and tried to forget. And Lena slept, trapped in darkness, while the world moved on without her. She woke on a Tuesday in October, for months after the fire. The first thing she saw was Ruth's face, older and more tired than she remembered. "Welcome back," Ruth said softly. Lena tried to speak, but her throat was dry, her voice gone. Ruth helped her sip water, patient and gentle. "How long?" Lena finally managed. "For months. You've been in a coma. Your body needed time." "My baby. Eliza. That's what they named her. She's healthy, Lena. Growing strong. The Hammonds are good parents." "Eliza. Not Elena, but close enough." The name made it real. Made her daughter someone else's now. Lena looked down at her hands. The burns had healed, leaving scars that twisted across her forearms like grotesque tattoos. Her body felt foreign, weak, wrong, but alive. Against all odds, devastatingly, impossibly alive. "Calvin?" she asked. "Engaged to a woman named Serena Vale. Planning a run for city council. Using your death for sympathy votes." Ruth's voice was carefully neutral. The investigation concluded it was an accident. Gas leak. Faulty detectors. No one questioned it. Because he got away with it. For now. Lena was quiet for a long moment. "Then, I want to see the file. Everything. The fire report, the investigation, the insurance claim. All of it. Why?" "Because I'm going to destroy him." Lena's voice was soft but certain. "He took everything from me. My life, my child, my name. And he's going to pay for it. But first, I need to be someone else." Recovery was brutal. Lena had to relearn her body. How to walk without favoring her scarred leg. How to use her hands when the burned skin pulled tight across her knuckles. How to breathe deeply when her lungs still carried the memory of smoke. But physical therapy was the easy part. Harder was learning to exist as a dead woman. Ruth had connections, old colleagues from her fire marshal days who knew how to navigate the gray areas of the system. Within 2 months, Lena had a new identity. Dr. Mara Cole, fire safety consultant, trauma survivor who'd lost her family in a house fire in Oregon, who'd spent years studying fire investigation to understand what had happened, who'd devoted her life to preventing similar tragedies. The story was close enough to the truth that Lena could inhabit it without breaking. The credentials were real. Ruth had contacts at universities who owed her favors, who could backdated coursework and certifications. The backstory was airtight. Oregon was far enough away that no one would question too deeply. "You need to be better than good at this," Ruth told her 6 months into the transformation. "You need to be excellent. Because when you get close to Calvin, when you start poking at his empire, he'll investigate you. And your cover has to hold." So Lena studied. She read every fire investigation manual Ruth owned. She learned about burn patterns, accelerant detection, smoke propagation, building codes, insurance fraud. She absorbed it the way a drowning person swallows air, desperately, necessarily, completely. But knowledge wasn't enough. She also had to become harder. The soft, trusting woman who'd married Calvin Brooks would never survive what was coming. She needed to be someone else. Someone stronger. Someone who could look her attempted murderer in the eye without flinching. Ruth trained her in that too. Not just the technical skills, but the emotional control. How to compartmentalize grief. How to weaponize trauma. How to turn pain into purpose. "When you see him again," Ruth said one night, 2 years after the fire, "you can't react. Can't show recognition. Can't let him see anything except Dr. Mara Cole, consultant. Can you do that?" Lena, Mara now nodded. She'd practiced in the mirror, perfecting the expression of professional distance. She'd rehearsed conversations, imagining every scenario. She was ready. Almost. The hardest part came on a warm spring afternoon when she drove past the elementary school in Ridgeway. She hadn't meant to, had told herself she wouldn't, but her rental car seemed to steer itself there, pulled by a magnetism she couldn't resist. Recess. Children swarming the playground. And there, on the swing set, a little girl with dark hair and her mother's eyes. Eliza Hammond, 4 years old, laughing as she pumped her legs, going higher, higher, fearless and beautiful and alive. Mara sat in her car across the street and watched her daughter, no, not her daughter anymore, Eliza Hammond, for 37 minutes. She memorized every detail. The way she jumped off the swing at the peak of its arc. The way she ran to show her teacher a drawing. The way she smiled. She's happy, Mara thought. She's loved. She's safe. And that had to be enough. Because claiming her now, before the work was done, would only put her in danger again. Calvin couldn't know Eliza was his daughter. Couldn't know she'd survived. Not until Mara was ready to end this. She drove away before anyone noticed her. Before she did something stupid like calling out, like running to her child, like breaking the fragile protection that keeping Eliza safe required. That night, she told Ruth she was ready. You're sure? Ruth asked. Once you start this, there's no going back. If Calvin figures out who you are, he won't. Mara's voice was certain. Because I'm not Lena Brooks anymore. Lena died in that fire. I'm Dr. Mara Cole. And I'm going to help Calvin Brooks's campaign implement fire safety protocols. I'm going to get close to him, earn his trust, and gather every piece of evidence I need to bury him. Ruth studied her for a long moment. You know there's a chance he'll never pay? That the system will protect him? That even with evidence, he'll walk away? Then I'll burn his life down anyway. Mara smiled, and it was not a kind expression. He taught me how. Calvin Brooks's city council campaign was going well. He'd positioned himself as a community reformer, someone who understood loss, who wanted to make Ridgeway safer, who'd turned personal tragedy into public service. The fact that he'd lost his wife and unborn child in a house fire made his passion for updated building codes and fire safety regulations seem genuine rather than calculated. He'd won the primary easily. Now he was 6 months from the general election, leading in the polls, building a coalition of suburban voters who saw in him the future they wanted. Young, dynamic, seemingly principled. Serena was the perfect campaign wife. She'd rebranded herself from nightlife marketer to nonprofit advocate. Her new organization focused on women's entrepreneurship. They were Ridgeway's golden couple, their engagement photos in the local paper, their wedding planned for after the election. Neither of them thought about Lena Brooks anymore. She was buried, literally and figuratively. A problem solved, a past erased. So when Dr. Mara Cole walked into their campaign office on a Monday morning in June, 4.5 years after the fire, neither Calvin nor Serena recognized her. Mr. Brooks, Mara said, extending her hand with a professional smile. I'm Dr. Mara Cole, fire safety consultant. I understand you're prioritizing updated building codes as part of your platform. I'd love to discuss how I might contribute to that effort. Calvin shook her hand, turning on the charm that had won him 1,000 votes. Dr. Cole, pleasure to meet you. Please, have a seat. Can I get you coffee? Mara sat across from the man who tried to kill her and felt nothing. No recognition flickered in his eyes. No alarm bells rang. She was invisible to him. Just another professional trying to attach herself to his rising star. Perfect. I've spent the last several years studying residential fire safety, Mara began, launching into the pitch she'd practiced. After losing my own family to a house fire, I made it my mission to understand how these tragedies happen and how they can be prevented. Your platform resonates with me. I'd like to help. She watched Calvin's face as she mentioned losing her family. Saw the practiced sympathy, the political calculation of how her tragic backstory could enhance his narrative. I'm so sorry for your loss, he said, and almost sounded sincere. That's exactly why this work matters. No one should have to experience what we have experienced. We. He said we, as if his manufactured tragedy and her real one were somehow equivalent. Mara nodded, keeping her expression neutral. I've reviewed some of the fire investigation reports from Ridgeway over the past 5 years. There are patterns worth examining, particularly in cases ruled accidental that show inconsistencies. She let the word hang there, watching his reaction. Nothing. Not even a flicker. Inconsistencies how? Calvin asked. disabled smoke detectors, tampered gas lines, burn patterns that suggest accelerant use. Small things that investigators sometimes miss. She pulled out a folder. For instance, there was a fire on Maple Drive 4 years ago. Tragic case, pregnant woman died. The report concluded gas leak, but looking at the photos, the burn pattern suggests a much faster ignition than a slow leak would create. Now she saw it. Just a micro-expression, a tightening around his eyes. But it was there. That was my first wife, Calvin said quietly. Lena, that's actually part of what drives my work now. I'm sorry. I didn't realize. Mara opened the folder, showing him fire scene photos that she'd spent weeks analyzing. Looking at these, I think the original investigation might have missed something. Not necessarily arson, but perhaps faulty equipment or code violations that contributed to how fast the fire spread. What are you suggesting? Just that your personal tragedy could actually strengthen your platform. If there were code violations, if there were preventable factors, that's exactly what your campaign is fighting to fix. It makes your mission personal and credible. She was offering him a gift, a way to turn his crime into campaign gold. And she watched him take it, saw the wheels turning in his politician's mind. You know, he said slowly, you might be right. Having an expert review Lena's case, finding preventable factors, that could be powerful. Would you be willing to do that? I'd pay your consulting fees, of course. I'd be honored, Mara said. Let me do a thorough investigation, and I'll prepare a report you can use. They shook hands again. Calvin smiled at her, already imagining the press conference, the emotional appeal, the votes he'd gain. And Mara smiled back, already imagining the evidence she'd find, the trap she'd set, the justice that was coming. Over the next 3 months, Dr. Mara Cole became indispensable to the Brooks campaign. She provided expertise on fire codes, reviewed policy proposals, made recommendations that made Calvin look knowledgeable and committed. She earned his trust inch by careful inch. Serena was harder to win over. Where Calvin saw a useful expert, Serena saw a potential threat. Another woman close to her fiancé, even if their relationship was purely professional. What's her story? Serena asked Calvin one night after a campaign meeting. This Dr. Cole. You're spending a lot of time with her. She's helping us win, Calvin said. Her expertise makes me credible on fire safety. Voters love it. I don't like her. You don't have to like her. You just have to tolerate her until after the election. But Serena's instincts weren't entirely wrong. She started paying closer attention to Mara, watching the way she moved through the campaign office, noting the questions she asked, the files she accessed. Marcus Vail noticed too. He'd stayed away from Ridgeway, tried to stay away from Calvin, but Serena had called him back to help with security for the campaign. Code word for intimidation, for digging up dirt on opponents, for doing the dirty work politicians couldn't be seen doing. When Marcus walked into the campaign office and saw Dr. Mara Cole, something about her made his skin crawl. Not recognition. He'd never seen Lena Brooks in person before the fire. But something. An instinct honed from years of doing wrong things and learning to recognize danger. Who's that? He asked Serena, nodding toward Mara. Fire safety consultant. Calvin's pet project. What? I don't know. Something about her. You're paranoid. I'm careful. There's a difference. Marcus watched Mara shake hands with a donor, saw the way she smiled, the way she cataloged everything. I'm going to run a background check on her. Calvin already did. She's clean. Then I'll run another one. Deeper. But Mara had anticipated this. Her cover was designed to withstand scrutiny. Real credentials, real history, real references. When Marcus dug, he found exactly what Ruth had planted. Dr. Mara Cole, fire safety expert, tragic backstory, impeccable qualifications. Still, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Mara spent 6 months inside the campaign, gathering evidence piece by careful piece. She copied financial records showing the insurance claim. She recorded conversations where Calvin discussed his late wife in ways that didn't quite add up. She built a timeline of the night of the fire that put Calvin's alibi under stress. But the real breakthrough came when she gained access to the campaign's private server. In a folder marked Personal, Do Not Open, she found emails between Calvin and Serena from before the fire. I can't keep doing this, one email read. She's going to find out eventually. Then we need to solve the problem permanently, Serena had replied. I know someone who can help. The emails didn't explicitly mention murder. They were too smart for that. But the implications were clear, and the timestamps, just 2 weeks before the fire, were damning. Mara copied everything, backed it up multiple times, began building the case that would end Calvin Brooks. But she wasn't done yet. Evidence alone might not be enough. She needed a confession, needed someone to break. And she knew exactly who the weak link was. Marcus Vale was drinking in a bar 40 miles outside Ridgeway when Mara found him. She'd tracked him through the campaign's security contracts, followed the paper trail to this dive on the wrong side of nowhere, where men came to hide from their mistakes. She sat down next to him without asking permission. "Marcus Vale," she said, "we need to talk." He looked at her, recognition finally clicking. "Dr. Cole, what the hell are you doing here? I know what you did." She kept her voice low, conversational. "The Maple Drive fire. I know you disabled the smoke detectors. I know you tampered with the gas line. I know Calvin Brooks paid you to kill his wife." Marcus went very still. "You're crazy." "Am I?" Mara pulled out a folder, a different one than she'd shown Calvin. This one contained a real analysis. Detailed photos of the smoke detectors, showing battery corrosion consistent with replacement shortly before the fire. Analysis of the gas line showing tool marks from deliberate tampering. Financial records showing $20,000 deposited in Marcus's account 2 days before the fire and $80,000 2 days after. "You're good," she continued, "but not perfect. You left traces. And I found them." Marcus's hand shook as he reached for his drink. "What do you want?" "The truth. On record. A confession that details exactly what Calvin asked you to do, how you did it, and what he paid you." "And why would I do that? That's life in prison." "Because if you don't, I take this evidence to the police anyway, and you go to prison without any hope of a deal. But if you cooperate, if you testify against Calvin, you might get manslaughter instead of murder. Might see daylight again before you die. He'll kill me if I talk." "He'll kill you anyway," Mara said bluntly. "You're a loose end, Marcus. The only question is whether you go out as his victim or as the man who finally did the right thing." She stood up, left the folder on the bar. "Think about it. You've got 48 hours before I go to the police. Your choice." She walked out, leaving Marcus staring at the evidence of his sins. 26 hours later, her burner phone rang. "I'll do it," Marcus said. "But I want immunity. Full immunity. I can't promise that. But I can promise I'll advocate for you. I can promise the prosecutors will know you cooperated. Then let's get this over with." They met in Ruth's cabin, neutral ground, secure, off the grid. Mara set up a video camera and a notary Ruth had brought in, someone who owed her enough favors to keep quiet about the irregular circumstances. "State your name," Mara said. "Marcus Daniel Vale. And you're here voluntarily?" "Yes." "Then tell us about the night of October 17th, 4.5 years ago. Tell us about the fire on Maple Drive." Marcus talked for 3 hours. He detailed everything. The first meeting with Calvin, the planning sessions, the payment structure. He explained how he'd disabled the smoke detectors, how he'd tampered with the gas line, how he'd calculated the timing. He described Calvin's instructions. "Make it look natural. Make sure she doesn't suffer." "Did you know she was pregnant?" Mara asked, her voice steady even though her heart was breaking. "Yeah, I knew. And you did it anyway. I needed the money." Marcus looked at the camera, and for a moment, guilt flickered across his face. "That's not an excuse. There is no excuse. I killed a pregnant woman for money. I'm going to hell, and I deserve it." "What about Serena Vale?" "My cousin. She was Calvin's girlfriend. The whole thing was her idea, really. She wanted Lena gone so she could have Calvin and his money." "And did Calvin Brooks explicitly ask you to kill his wife?" "He said, I need the Lena problem solved permanently. Make it look like an accident. I'll pay you $100,000. Marcus met Mara's eyes. There wasn't any ambiguity. He wanted her dead. After the interview, Mara made 4 copies of the confession. One went to Ruth for safekeeping. One went to a lawyer Ruth trusted. One went into a safety deposit box under Dr. Mara Cole's name. And one, the most important one, she kept with her. The next phase required perfect timing. Calvin's campaign had a major fundraiser scheduled in 2 weeks. A black tie event at the Ridgeway Grand Hotel. 500 attendees, major donors, press coverage. Calvin planned to announce his detailed policy platform and position himself as the inevitable winner. Mara arranged for the FBI to be there instead. She'd spent weeks coordinating with Agent Jennifer Reyes, head of the Bureau's Financial Crimes Division in Houston. Reyes had been skeptical at first, until Mara showed her the evidence. The emails, the financial records, the fire investigation analysis, and finally, Marcus Vale's confession. "This is solid," Reyes said, reviewing everything for the third time. "We can bring charges for insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, arson. We can make this stick." "I want him arrested publicly," Mara said. "At the fundraiser. In front of everyone he's lied to. That's not usually how we. He killed his wife in front of witnesses and made them think it was an accident. He deserves to be exposed the same way. Publicly. Completely." Reyes considered. "If we're going to do this, we need to be absolutely certain. Defense attorneys will argue we're grandstanding, trying to poison the jury pool. They can argue whatever they want. But when Calvin Brooks goes down, I want the whole world to see it." The night of the fundraiser, Mara dressed carefully. Black dress, professional but elegant. Hair pulled back. Scars on her arms covered with long sleeves. She looked like Dr. Mara Cole, respected consultant, campaign insider. She arrived early, checked in with the FBI team positioned around the hotel, and made her way to the ballroom where Calvin would give his speech. Calvin found her near the bar. "Mara, glad you could make it. Have you seen the turnout? We're going to crush the general election." "It's impressive," she agreed. "You've built something remarkable here." "We've built something remarkable," he corrected. "Your expertise has been invaluable. After the election, I'd like to discuss bringing you on full-time. Maybe as a director of public safety for the city. What do you think?" She thought about how easy it would be to accept, to let him continue believing she was on his side. "That's very generous. Let's see how tonight goes first." Serena appeared at Calvin's elbow, possessive and suspicious. "The press wants a photo," she said, steering him away. But she shot Mara a look that said clearly, "I still don't trust you." The ballroom filled. Donors in expensive suits, politicians positioning for access, journalists covering the rising star. At 8 o'clock, Calvin took the stage. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began, his voice carrying that practiced sincerity that had won him so many votes. "4 years ago, I lost the most important person in my life. My wife Lena died in a house fire, a preventable tragedy that changed everything for me." Mara watched from the side of the ballroom, her hands steady, her expression neutral. "That loss drives everything I do now," Calvin continued. "Every policy I propose, every code I want to update, every safety measure I advocate for, it's all in Lena's memory. She deserves a legacy that saves lives." The audience was rapt. Some people were crying. Calvin's performance was flawless. "And tonight, I want to share with you the comprehensive fire safety platform that will define my time on City Council. A platform developed with the help of Dr. Mara Cole, one of the nation's leading experts on." "Actually," Mara said, stepping forward, her voice carrying across the ballroom, "I think there's something else we need to discuss first." Calvin faltered, confused. "Mara, this isn't the time." "I disagree. I think this is exactly the time." She walked to the front of the ballroom as FBI agents began moving through the doors, sealing the exits. "Tell them about the smoke detectors, Calvin. The ones that were disabled before the fire. Tell them about the gas line that was tampered with. Tell them about the $100,000 you paid Marcus Vale to kill your wife." The room erupted. Gasps, shocked murmurs, people standing up. Calvin's face went white. "What are you? I don't know what you're talking about." Marcus confessed. "We have everything on video. The planning, the payment, the execution. We have your emails to Serena discussing how to solve the problem permanently. We have financial records showing the insurance payout and how you split it." Mara's voice was steady, calm, devastating. "You murdered your pregnant wife for money, and you've been using her death to win votes." "This is insane," Calvin shouted. "I don't know who you are or what." "I'm Dr. Mara Cole," she said. "But you knew me by another name once." She pulled off her jacket, revealing the burn scars that twisted across her arms. She let her hair down, no longer pulled back in the severe professional style. And she looked at him directly, letting him finally see past the disguise, past the years, past the assumed death. "My name is Lena Brooks," she said, "and I didn't die in your fire." The recognition hit Calvin like a physical blow. He stumbled backward, his face a mask of horror and disbelief. "No, you're dead. I saw the body. You saw someone else. Another woman who died in the fire you set. But I survived." She stepped closer. I pulled myself out of the flames while you stood in the street celebrating with your mistress. I heard you laughing while I burned. And I spent the last 4 years getting strong enough to face you again." Serena tried to run. FBI agents caught her before she made it to the door. Marcus, who'd been brought in earlier, was already in custody. Calvin just stood there, his whole world collapsing. "Calvin Brooks," Agent Reyes said, stepping forward with handcuffs. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, arson, insurance fraud, and a whole list of other charges I'll be happy to detail at the station." As they led him away, Calvin looked back at Lena one more time. "The baby," he said. "Our baby. Our daughter survived too," Lena said quietly. "No thanks to you. She's alive, she's safe, and she'll grow up knowing her father tried to kill her before she was born. She'll know you're a murderer, and she'll know her mother fought to bring you to justice." Calvin's face crumpled as they pushed him toward the door. The trial took 8 months. Marcus's confession was damning, but the prosecution built the case carefully, methodically. They brought in fire investigators who testified about the tampered equipment, financial experts who traced the money, and finally, they brought in Lena Brooks, alive, scarred, but unbroken, to testify. "Tell us what happened the night of October 17th, the prosecutor asked. And Lena told them everything. The fire, the smoke, the moment she saw Calvin in the street, watching her burn, the years of recovery, the slow transformation into someone strong enough to seek justice. The defense tried to argue that Lena's testimony was unreliable, that her trauma had confused her memories. But Marcus's confession corroborated everything. The evidence corroborated everything. And when Serena, facing her own charges, finally broke and turned state's evidence, even that last defense crumbled. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Calvin Brooks was sentenced to life without parole. Serena got 25 years. Marcus, who'd cooperated, got 15 with possibility of parole. After the sentencing, Lena stood on the courthouse steps and faced the cameras one last time. "For 4 years," she said, "I was dead. I lost my name, my identity, my daughter, everything that made me who I was. But I gained something too. I learned that strength isn't about never breaking. It's about what you build from the pieces. Fire took everything from me, but it also revealed who I was meant to become." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "To anyone watching this who's surviving their own nightmare, who's been betrayed, broken, or left for dead, I want you to know that survival is just the beginning. Justice is possible. Healing is possible. And you are stronger than whatever tried to destroy you." The road after the trial was long and complicated. Lena couldn't immediately reclaim motherhood. Eliza had known the Hammonds as her parents for 5 years, and ripping her away would have been cruel. But slowly, carefully, with therapy and mediation, Lena became part of her daughter's life. At first, just visits. Then weekends. Then summers. Eliza learned the truth, that her biological mother had survived an attempt on her life, had given her up to keep her safe, had spent years fighting to bring her attempted murderer to justice. "Are you mad at me?" Lena asked during one of their early visits, when Eliza was 6 and struggling to understand the complicated truth of her origins. Eliza thought about it seriously. "I don't think so. I think you were brave. And I think you loved me even when you couldn't be with me. I did. I do. Always." It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was messy and complicated, full of therapy sessions and hard conversations and moments when Eliza didn't know whether to call her mom or Lena. But it was real, and it was healing. 2 years after the trial, Lena opened the Ember House, a recovery center for survivors of domestic violence and fire trauma. She hired Sarah Chun as medical director and Ruth Calder as safety coordinator. She used the money from her victim compensation claim and the settlement from Calvin's estate to fund it. The Ember House became a sanctuary, a place where women fleeing dangerous marriages could find safety, where burn survivors could heal both physically and emotionally, where people who'd lost everything could learn to build again. On the 5th anniversary of the fire, Lena stood in the garden behind the Ember House, watching Eliza play with other children whose mothers were in the recovery program. Eliza was 10 now, splitting her time between 2 families who both loved her, slowly building her own understanding of who she was and where she came from. Ruth joined Lena at the edge of the garden. "You did good, kid." "We did good," Lena corrected. "None of this happens without you." "Maybe, but you're the one who survived. You're the one who turned trauma into purpose." Lena was quiet for a moment, watching her daughter laugh. "I used to think the worst thing that ever happened to me was that fire. But now, I don't know. It destroyed everything I thought my life was supposed to be. But it gave me something too. It gave me the strength to fight, the clarity to see what really mattered, the courage to build something meaningful from the ashes." She turned to face Ruth. "I wouldn't choose it again. I'd give anything to have lived a normal life, to have raised my daughter from birth, to have never known what it's like to burn. But since I can't change what happened, I'm grateful for what I became because of it." Eliza ran over, breathless and grinning. "Mom." She paused, still navigating what to call Lena, then continued. "Can we plant more flowers? The ones by the front door are beautiful." "Of course," Lena said. "What kind do you want?" "Phoenix flowers. I learned about them in school. They're named after the bird that rises from ashes." Lena smiled, her heart full in a way she'd never thought possible again. Phoenix flowers. Perfect choice. As they walked toward the garden shed, hand in hand, Lena thought about the closing statement she'd given to the press after the trial. About how fire reveals who you're meant to become. She'd meant it. Every word. Because the woman who'd burned in that house on Maple Drive, soft, trusting, breakable Lena Brooks, really had died. And from the ashes had risen someone stronger. Someone who could face impossible odds and win. Someone who could turn the worst thing that ever happened to her into the best thing she could give to others. Fire had tried to destroy her. Instead, it had forged her into something unbreakable. And that was its own kind of justice. If you found Lena's story as powerful as we did, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below sharing what moved you most or where you're watching from. And if you believe stories of survival and justice like this deserve to be heard, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear about the strength of the human spirit. Your support helps us bring more inspiring, true stories to light. Until next time, remember, you are stronger than whatever tries to break you.